Think about it. You've probably already made dozens of choices today. But have you ever stopped to wonder what's really going on in your head when you pick one thing over another? Well, today we're going to dive deep and explore those invisible forces that secretly drive every single decision you make, from the tiny ones to the truly life-changing ones.
So let's start with something super simple. Coffee or tea this morning? I mean, it seems totally trivial, right? But believe it or not, the mental machinery whirring away behind even that tiny little decision is surprisingly complex. And I think by the end of this, you're going to realize there's really no such thing as a simple choice.
So, how do we even begin to unpack all that complexity? Well, kind of ironically, to understand how we actually make decisions, we first have to look at the perfect way we're supposed to make them. The ideal blueprint.
Okay, so it all starts with something called mental models. Your brain is constantly building these. Think of them like internal blueprints or, maps of how you think the world works, how people behave, how stuff unfolds. Every single choice you make is based on these incredibly complex and sometimes, pretty flawed internal maps.
Right.
So, in a perfectly rational world, every single decision would follow this super neat 7-step process. You'd identify the decision, gather all the information, look at all the alternatives, weigh the evidence. You get the idea. It's methodical, it's thorough, and, spoiler alert, it's almost nothing like how our brains actually work in the real world.
And this whole idealized process isn't just some nice idea. It's meant to be the blueprint for a perfectly rational mind. And the entire model is built on one really simple, powerful goal: getting the absolute best deal for yourself, no matter the situation.
Yeah, there's a fancy name for this. It's called expected utility theory. And the core idea is pretty simple. When you're faced with a choice, a truly rational person would calculate the potential value, the utility, of every single option, and then just pick the one with the biggest probable payoff. Basically, it assumes we're all just logical, calculating machines.
But let's be real for a second. Does that sound like you? I mean, do you pull out a spreadsheet every time you need to decide what to have for lunch? No way, of course not. Reality, as it turns out, is much, much messier than that.
And that brings us to what I think is the most fascinating part of this whole story: the mind's hidden shortcuts. These are the biases, the mental tricks our brains use to get through a super complex world without just short-circuiting. They're fast, they're efficient, and they're often completely irrational.
And hey, it's not just you, I promise. Research has proven over and over that our preferences are shockingly inconsistent. What you want one moment can completely flip the next. And not because the options changed, but because our internal wiring is just full of these fascinating, totally illogical quirks.
Okay, let's dive into a really big one: prospect theory. At its core is this incredibly powerful concept called loss aversion. The idea is simple, but it's really profound. Psychologically, the pain of losing something hurts way, way more than the pleasure of gaining the exact same thing. Just think about it like this: finding $100 on the street? That's nice. You get a little boost for your day. But losing $100 that was already in your wallet? Oof, that feels devastating, right? Maybe even twice as bad. And this powerful bias makes us absolutely terrified of loss, and it pushes us to be super cautious, even when taking a risk might actually be worth it.
All right, quick question for you. Picture this. You're at the supermarket. You see 2 packages of ground beef sitting side by side. One is labeled 80% lean, and the other is 20% fat. Which one are you grabbing if you're trying to be healthy?
Well, the trick here is it doesn't matter. They are the exact same thing. But I am willing to bet that most of you listening instinctively felt that 80% lean just sounded like the healthier choice.
And what you just experienced there, that's the framing effect. It's this incredibly powerful bias where just the presentation of information completely changes how we feel about it. So by framing the exact same product in terms of a positive, lean, versus a negative, fat, our entire decision-making process can get completely hijacked. And this kind of irrationality gets even more fascinating when we start talking about money with something called mental accounting. I mean, logically, a dollar is a dollar, right? But not in our heads. A tax refund, that feels like free money, something you can just go spend. But that exact same amount in your regular paycheck, that's serious rent money. We create these totally separate mental buckets, and it leads us to treat our own money in completely illogical ways.
Okay, so up to now, we've mostly been focused on you versus your own brain. But things get infinitely more complex when we have to make choices that involve other people. And of course, their choices affect us. This is where strategy really comes into play. Let's look at the classic example, the prisoner's dilemma. So imagine you and a partner in crime get caught. The police put you in separate rooms. Here's the deal. If you both stay quiet, you each get just 1 year in jail. But the cops offer you a better deal. If you betray your partner and they stay silent, you walk free and they get 3 years. The catch? Your partner is getting the exact same offer. So if you both betray each other, you both get 2 years. The most rational move for you as an individual is to betray. But if you both think that way, you both end up worse off than if you just cooperated.
So what this really shows is that in these strategic situations, we're not just weighing our own options anymore. We are constantly trying to build a mental model of the other person's mental model. We're asking ourselves, what are they thinking? What do they think I'm thinking? This whole process is called theory of mind, and it's what lets us navigate the super complex social world of cooperation and competition.
Okay, so we've seen the flawless, irrational blueprint on one side and the messy, biased reality of our minds on the other. So the big question is, now what? Now that we're armed with this knowledge, can we actually learn to choose more wisely? So let's just bring it all together for a second. We've learned that while your brain has that rational blueprint, it hardly ever follows it. Instead, these powerful shortcuts are in the driver's seat. You've got loss aversion, making us terrified of what we might lose. You've got the framing effect, which means how something is said is often more important than what is said. We use mental accounts to treat our money in really illogical ways. And as soon as other people get involved, our decisions turn into this complex game of trying to guess their next move. I think the ultimate takeaway here is that none of us are as rational as we'd like to think we are. But just knowing about these hidden biases, that's the first most crucial step toward maybe overcoming them. So I'll leave you with this question. Now that you can see at least some of the invisible strings that are pulling on your choices, how are you going to choose to pull them differently?